It started with the sound. Not voices, not footsteps, not even a creak, just a low, persistent hum, like a refrigerator running, except there was nothing plugged in beneath the floorboards. Margaret thought she was imagining it, a side effect of stress, maybe grief. But then she heard it shift. One night it pulsed like a heartbeat. Another it began to whisper her name. The doctors said she was experiencing auditory hallucinations, a symptom of schizoaffective disorder. But she wasn't losing her mind, at least not in the way they thought. Because when she finally tore up the floorboards, the last thing she expected to find was the photograph. Her sister, and the man she swore she'd never met in her life. Margaret's hands trembled as she turned the key in the front door. The old colonial creaked like it was exhaling. Dust motes danced in the early evening light. The house smelled like wood polish, mothballs, and memory. Her parents had passed 6 months ago. Carbon monoxide leak in the basement while they slept. Peaceful, the coroner said. A tragedy, but clean. No one to blame. Now the house was hers. She had put it off for as long as she could. Cleared out the estate, ignored the calls from the probate attorney, let the grass grow tall and wild. But grief has a way of pooling in the corners of a place, and Margaret needed to drain it. She needed closure. The first night back in her childhood, home was like sleeping inside a memory. Every shadow knew her name. The ticking grandfather clock in the hall, the wallpaper peeling slightly above the fireplace, the faded cross-stitch that still read, "Home is where the heart is." She drank half a bottle of Pinot Noir and fell asleep in her childhood bedroom, curled under the same quilt her mother made when she was 10. The sound woke her at 3:12 a.m., a low hum, faint, mechanical. At first she thought it was tinnitus, a yaw, side effect of her migraines maybe. But it wasn't in her ears, it was in the floor. She pressed her ear to the wooden boards. There it was again. A steady rhythmic vibration. Too regular to be plumbing, too alive to be electrical. She didn't sleep after that. The next morning she called an electrician. He inspected the wiring, tapped the walls, opened the breaker box and scratched his head. "There's nothing down there," he said. "No wiring under that part of the house. You sure it wasn't just the wind?" It wasn't the wind. She tried to ignore it, but the hum returned the next night, louder. This time it seemed to change pitch, rising and falling like breath. She tried recording it with her phone, but the playback only captured silence. By day 3, it was whispering. Not words exactly, more like syllables broken in half, a distorted, garbled voice repeating something just beyond comprehension. Made her nauseous, disoriented. She vomited in the sink and told herself it was stress, the grief, the wine. Anything but what it really felt like something buried alive was calling to her. Margaret booked an emergency appointment with Dr. Hauser, the psychiatrist who'd treated her for depression last year. He listened carefully, adjusted his glasses, and gently suggested the possibility of schizoaffective disorder. Sometimes auditory hallucinations can emerge during prolonged periods of stress or trauma, he said, handing her a prescription for risperidone. She flushed the pills down the toilet, because that night, when the hum returned, it said her name, Maggie. And she remembered. Nobody had called her that since her sister vanished. Margaret hadn't spoken her sister's name in nearly 20 years. She hadn't needed to. In the official reports, it was ruled an accident. Elizabeth Ann Walker, age 11, last seen playing by the woods behind their property line. A sudden storm, a swollen creek, a single pink sneaker found lodged between 2 rocks downstream. They never found her body. Margaret was 15, and in the months that followed, she remembered almost nothing, just snapshots. Her mother screaming into the trees, her father drinking in the dark, the endless stream of neighbors bearing casseroles and condolences. And Margaret herself, wrapped in silence, staring at the floorboards in the living room as if they held some buried truth. The memories returned like splinters now. That night, after the voice whispered, "Maggie," she bolted upright in bed, sweat-soaked and shaking. The room was dead silent, except for that low, pulsing hum beneath the floor. She grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and padded barefoot into the hallway. The sound was strongest in the den. She hadn't stepped foot in that room since returning. Something about it always felt wrong. Like the air hung heavier there, as if morning lingered thicker than anywhere else. The floor creaked under her feet as she stepped onto the faded rug, now mottled with dust and neglect. The hum grew louder, more urgent. She dropped to her knees and peeled the rug back. There it was, the old floorboard, slightly warped. The one her father had always warned them not to step on. It squeaked too loudly. As kids, they made a game of jumping over it. Margaret pressed her palm flat against the wood. It was warm. Her breath caught. She grabbed a nearby screwdriver from the cabinet and wedged it into the seam, prying gently until the nail gave a long metallic squeal. Then the board came loose. She expected to find insulation, pipes, maybe even nothing at all. What she found, instead, was a small wooden box, hand-carved with a clasp rusted shut. Her heart thundered. Her vision swam. She pulled it free, sat cross-legged on the cold floor, and opened it. Inside were 3 items: a pair of ballet slippers, small and pink, stained dark at the toe, a faded friendship bracelet, purple and blue, with a plastic charm, shaped like a butterfly, and a Polaroid. Margaret's hands trembled as she held it to the light. It showed her, age 15, sitting on the back steps of the house. Elizabeth was beside her, clutching a teddy bear. And standing behind them was a man she didn't recognize, tall, wiry, face half in shadow. But the way his hand rested on her shoulder felt familiar, intimate, wrong. She didn't remember the photo. She didn't remember the man. But what chilled her blood was her expression in the picture. She was smiling, not just a casual grin, a wide, almost manic smile, like she was proud, like she had done something and wanted the whole world to know. Margaret dropped the photo. Suddenly the hum beneath her grew louder, rising like a scream muffled under 10 feet of dirt. And for the first time, it didn't sound mechanical. It sounded like crying. The photo lay face down on the floor, and Margaret couldn't bring herself to flip it back over. Her fingers buzzed with a phantom heat, like she'd touched something radioactive. Her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. She backed away from the open floorboard, from the crying sound that now throbbed through the planks like a heartbeat made of bone and sorrow. She spent the night in her car, locked in the driver's seat with a blanket over her shoulders. She stared at the house through the windshield. The lights flickered in the den window, though she was certain she'd turned them all off. She didn't sleep. Her thoughts splintered, turned inward, chased themselves in tightening loops. Who was the man in the photo? Why couldn't she remember? Taking it? And why did she smile like that? At sunrise, she drove into town and parked in front of the county library. It hadn't changed since she was a kid. Same flaking paint, same grim librarian with the uneven wig. The microfiche reader squealed as she cranked it through 20-year-old newspaper scans. She searched for Elizabeth's name, the incident, the storm, anything. Then she saw it. Teen found unresponsive in shock after sister disappears. It was a short piece, buried in the local section. Margaret Walker, 15, had been discovered by her father sitting in the den, unblinking, unresponsive, covered in mud and pine needles. No visible injuries. She was hospitalized for 3 days. Diagnosis: dissociative state, acute trauma response. She didn't remember that either, but something about it unlocked a door. Back in the car, she gripped the steering wheel and closed her eyes. Suddenly, she was there again. That summer. The rain had just started. She and Elizabeth were running back from the woods, giggling, chasing lightning bugs. Their shoes were soaked, their hair plastered to their scalps. She remembered grabbing Elizabeth's hand, tugging her toward the back door. But then, something sharp. A voice? No, not a voice. A sound like static, screeching in her ears. Pain, then blackness. She jolted awake in the driver's seat. The photo, the bracelet, the slippers, the hum. All of it. It wasn't just a hallucination. It was trying to tell her something, to remind her. She returned to the house that night with gloves, garbage bags, and her old Polaroid pressed between two heavy books. She didn't look at it. She couldn't. The den floorboard yawned open like a wound. The box still sat there, waiting, innocent as a coffin. That's when she noticed something new. Scratched into the underside of the board, in jagged, desperate lines, was a word: remember. Her breath hitched. She ran her fingers along the grooves. There was dirt packed into them, fresh, impossible. She dropped the board and stepped back. The hum started again, louder than before, and this time it was layered, voices overlapping like a corrupted tape. Maggie, help. It's cold. Then, beneath the crying, another whisper. He's still here. Her knees buckled, because suddenly she knew who the man in the photo was. Not his name, not his face, but the way he stood behind them, the way he touched her shoulder. She'd seen him in her nightmares for years, and he was inside the house. Margaret didn't call the police. She told herself it was because she didn't trust them. That small-town cops wouldn't believe her, about the sound, the photo, the memories crawling out from under her skin like insects. But the truth was simpler. She was afraid of what they might find. Instead, she went to Home Depot and bought a crowbar. That night, with shaking hands and every light in the house turned on, she began peeling back the walls of the den. Plaster cracked under the weight of her grip. Dust choked the air. Her arms ached as she tore away layers of paint, drywall, insulation. Then she found it. A narrow, sealed doorway. No handle, no hinges. Just an outline, faint but unmistakable, carved into the structure of the house like a scar the builders forgot to cover. The hum was loudest here. She traced the seam with her fingers, breath shallow. The drywall around it had been patched, recently. The paint was fresh, slightly brighter than the surrounding wall. She hesitated, then drove the crowbar into the seam. It gave with a sickening crack. Behind the fake wall was a narrow staircase, steep and unlit, descending into a space that wasn't on the original blueprints of the house. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped inside. The air shifted. It was colder, thicker. The walls were concrete, unfinished, and moist with condensation. The hum became more distinct, a pattern now, like coded pulses, like Morse. Then she reached the bottom. It wasn't a basement. It was a room, 6 feet by 10, a cot, a bucket, a light bulb dangling from a wire. The smell hit her all at once. Urine, mold, rot. Her stomach turned. In the far corner, carved into the wall, were hundreds of scratch marks, tallies, names, words written and rewritten until they blurred into madness. And on the cot, folded neatly, was another photo. She picked it up. It was her. Younger again, maybe 13. In the kitchen, frosting a birthday cake. Behind her, barely visible through the window, was the same man, watching, smiling. She dropped it. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. Then she saw the journal. It was tucked beneath the cot, wrapped in a garbage bag, stained and warped. She opened it carefully. The first page was blank, then a crude drawing. Stick figures, 2 girls, one tall, one small, and a third figure, bigger, looming. The next page, a name written over and over, Mr. Collin. The pages turned dark after that, desperate scribbles. He says if I tell, she'll go away too. She cries at night. He says it's my fault. She didn't fight hard enough. Margaret dropped the journal, backed out of the room, and slammed the wall shut behind her. Her vision blurred. She fell to her knees in the hallway and vomited into a dusty flower pot. Who had written it? Elizabeth? Her? She didn't know anymore. She crawled back to the den, lifted the floorboard, and stared into the empty space where the box had been. It was gone. In its place, scratched deep into the floor beneath, were 4 words that made her blood run cold. You were there too. Margaret stopped answering the phone. Dr. Hauser called twice, then left a voicemail that started calm and ended pleading. Margaret, this isn't how we treat trauma. You have to talk to someone. But his voice felt 1,000 miles away, irrelevant. Polite concern layered over a screaming truth. She wasn't hallucinating. She wasn't unstable. She was remembering, and what she remembered terrified her. She didn't leave the house for 3 days. She ate crackers, drank water, sat in the hallway outside the sealed wall with the flashlight in her lap, waiting to hear that voice again, Elizabeth's voice. But the hum had stopped. The house had gone still, like it was watching her, holding its breath. Then on the 4th night, the doorbell rang. No headlights outside, no movement. Just the long, lonely chime echoing through the house. She approached the front door slowly, feet numb against the hardwood. Looked through the peephole. No one. But on the doormat, laid perfectly flat, was the Polaroid. The first one. The one from the box. Her, Elizabeth, and the man with his hand on her shoulder. She hadn't brought it outside. She hadn't left it anywhere. Someone else had. That night, sleep came like a chokehold. Her dreams were warped reels of static and screams. She saw herself holding a doll and laughing. Then the doll was Elizabeth. Then it wasn't a doll at all. She woke gasping on the living room couch, and she realized what she had to do. The attic. It had been locked since her parents died. Her father always claimed it was full of useless junk and asbestos. But Margaret remembered the creaking ladder, the sound of footsteps overhead when no one else was home. And once, when she was 12, Elizabeth had asked, "Why doesn't Mommy?" Like the man in the attic. That memory hadn't surfaced in decades. She found the key taped behind the kitchen light switch, exactly where her mother used to hide spare house keys. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step up feeling like a betrayal. The attic door groaned open. She shined the flashlight inside. Cobwebs, dust, boxes, the usual. But then, something else. A mirror, full length, leaned against the far wall, half covered, in a sheet. It didn't reflect anything at first, just shadows. Margaret pulled the sheet away and stared into it. The room behind her looked normal, but her reflection was wrong. She wasn't standing. She was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, holding something. The box, the one from beneath the floorboards. She turned in real life. There was nothing in her hands. But the reflection remained. Her, cradling the box, staring into the camera with that same wide smile, and the reflection whispered something she couldn't hear, but she felt it. Go further. She looked past the mirror. Behind it, another panel in the wall, slightly ajar. She pulled it open. Inside was another room, not dusty, not old. New clean walls, a bed, a desk, a single light bulb, like someone had just left, and on the desk, a row of Polaroids lined up edge to edge. Every one of them featured her. Different ages, different rooms, always with the same man, always smiling, always standing still, as if posing for something she never remembered taking. Then, taped to the wall behind them, a note in slanted handwriting. She loved you so much. Why did you let him take her? Margaret fell to her knees. She didn't scream, because deep down she already knew the answer. She didn't leave the attic. Not that night, not the next, not even to eat. She sat on the floor of that secret room, surrounded by the photos of a life. She couldn't remember living, feeling like a ghost inside her own body. The hum had returned, softer now, less mechanical, more like the distant vibration of a cello string. It resonated in her bones, a sound too deep to be heard, only felt. She had no idea who she was anymore. Each photograph was like a pin through her skin. She studied the angles, the expressions. In every image, her eyes were hollow, always smiling, but never happy. The man beside her changed slightly with each one, older in some, thinner in others, but always him, always Colin. She should have recognized him, but that was the thing about trauma. It didn't erase the memory, it buried it, drowned it in silence until it stopped screaming. Her parents had lied to her. All her life, they had told her she was sick. Night terrors, dissociation, a creative imagination. When she told them about the man who came into her room at night and whispered stories in the dark, they sent her to therapy, medicated her. taught her to doubt herself. And when Elizabeth disappeared, they gave her something stronger. She had flashes now, buried moments rushing back like floodwaters breaking. Adam. Elizabeth crying under the covers. Margaret holding the door shut while someone knocked gently from the hallway, the way her father never looked her in the eye after the funeral. But one memory shone through them all. She was in the den, alone. The floorboard creaked. A hand reached up, not to hurt her, but to ask for help. Elizabeth, trapped beneath the floor, alive. And Margaret had stepped back. No, not just stepped back. She had pushed the board closed. Something inside her cracked. She stood and began ripping the photographs off the wall. They came loose in strips, the tape curling like scorched paper. Beneath them, written in pencil over and over again, was a phrase, "Don't trust the memory." She ran down the attic stairs, through the house, into the den. She tore up the floorboards one by one until the entire foundation yawned open like a grave. Dirt, old wood, the remnants of the box, and something else. A shallow indentation in the soil, just big enough for a child. She dropped too, her knees digging with bare hands, fingernails shredding, arms trembling. Then, plastic, a torn bag, fabric inside, flesh, no bones, just fragments, a small hand, a butterfly bracelet, Elizabeth. She collapsed, sobbing into the earth. But as the wind howled through the open window, she heard it again. Her name, whispered softly, not from the floor this time, from behind her. She turned and saw herself standing in the hallway, not a reflection, not a hallucination. A girl, 13, maybe 14, wearing the same pajamas from the photos, smiling that same awful smile, and she spoke in Margaret's own voice. "You don't remember what you did, but I do." Then she was gone, like static, flickering out, and Margaret was alone again, but not the same, because now she wasn't sure if the sister who vanished was Elizabeth or her. The police arrived at dawn. A neighbor had called about the screaming. Margaret sat on the porch, barefoot and filthy, her hands covered in dirt and blood and something that might have once been silk. She didn't resist when they cuffed her, didn't speak when they read her rights, didn't blink as the crime scene tape went up across the lawn. She watched them dig, watched as they uncovered the shallow grave beneath the den. The forensic team moved slowly, carefully. A small body, partial remains, bones too fragile to carry, a name. But the bracelet was still wrapped around the wrist, the one Margaret remembered tying herself. They booked her into county holding. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She didn't make a phone call. She just sat in the interview room under a buzzing fluorescent light, staring at the camera in the corner like it might blink and tell her what was real. Detective Carla Ames was the one they sent, middle-aged, pragmatic, no patience for theatrics. She slid a folder across the table. "Tell me about this man, Mr. Collin." Margaret stared at the name. It felt foreign, scripted, like something from a dream she no longer trusted. "I don't think he ever existed," she said quietly. The detective blinked. "You made him up?" "No," Margaret said. "They did." She explained everything, the hum, the photos, the box beneath the floorboards, her fractured memories, how they weren't gone, just misfiled, rearranged. Every time she got too close, her parents had medicated her, redirected, whispered things like, "You were confused," or "It wasn't your fault." And the moment that shattered her, the realization that it wasn't Mr. Collin who buried Elizabeth. It was her, not on purpose, not maliciously, a game in the den. Hide and seek. Elizabeth went under the boards. Margaret sealed them shut to scare her. Thought it was funny, but then she forgot. She forgot everything. The trauma of watching her sister die, the guilt, the horror. It shattered her. So her mind created Collin, an abuser, a monster, someone else to carry the weight. Detective Ames opened the folder again. "The journal?" Margaret nodded. "I wrote it. I think I wrote all of it." She rubbed her arms. They felt cold, foreign. They kept the truth from me. My parents, They thought they were protecting me. The detective looked at her carefully. You were 15. Margaret met her gaze. Old enough to kill someone. There was a long silence. Then Detective Ames closed the file. We're not charging you. Margaret blinked. What? Statute of limitations. You were a minor. No intent, no body until now. And the psychiatric history? No jury in the world would convict you. Margaret felt the room spin. So what happens now? The detective stood. That's up to you. 6 months later, the house on Pine Ridge Road was sold to a developer. Margaret didn't attend the demolition. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment, near the water now. No floorboards, no attics, just blank walls and the ocean wind. But sometimes, late at night, when the silence stretched too long, she heard it again. The hum, not in her ears, but in her mind. And deep down, she still wasn't sure if it was grief or if it was Elizabeth still trying to get out.